Hey, how's it going? This is Jeremy, the Connections Pastor here at Thrive Church, Texas, and I hope that you're doing awesome. It's good to see you again, and I'm sure you feel the same way about hanging with me, so what's up, what's up, what's up? This week, we kicked off a brand new series titled You Asked For It. We're taking your questions, and we're exploring what God has to say, and our hope is to bring some clarity to areas that may be confusing. That makes these discussion groups especially important because it's in these groups where you're really going to get to dig in with others in a circle and really explore what God might be saying on each of these topics. And I think that's pretty awesome. In the weeks ahead, we'll be addressing some of the challenging questions that you've asked about faith, about the Christian worldview, and about God. This past Sunday, we dove into the series with this big question: why does God allow evil and suffering in the world? Good question, right? It's a question I've asked too. In just a few moments, we're going to watch a video from Pastor James Grogan out of Eastlake Church in Chula Vista, California. And as a cool aside, Eastlake, it's this church that we have a friendship with. They've supported Thrive in lots of ways, jumped in and sent supplies to us here during Hurricane Harvey, and we love these guys. And so it's exciting to be able to learn from them today. Leading into today's segment, Pastor James Grogan makes the statement that this question, the question, why does God allow evil and suffering in the world, is especially difficult for us because it's personal and emotional for all of us. Like, we all know somebody who's suffered. We've all experienced suffering in some way, shape, or form that has made us personally say, hey, God, like, seriously, what's going on? And as Pastor Grogan steps into this next segment, he's going to open up with another question. That question is, would you erase all evil and everything bad in the world if you could? Would you? At a first blush, I find myself saying, like, heck yeah, I'd get rid of it all. But here's the problem with that. And it's that I'm not perfect, so I'm gone, right? My kids aren't perfect either. In fact, even my wife, okay, so she's perfect. But a whole bunch of other people I know, maybe including you and those who are sitting right next to you right now in your circle, in your discussion group, they're not perfect either, right? So lean in. Listen to what Pastor James has to say. It's not an easy conversation that we're getting into today. In fact, the conversations ahead, they're going to be a little bit challenging, but it's an important one because it's the question that people are asking more than any other question about God. So let's hear what he has to say today.
So this is the argument. And so before if you're asking that question to God, it's fair to ask it of you. If you had the easy button to remove all evil and everything bad, would you push it? And now before you answer, let me ask you a series of questions. Have you ever done anything evil or bad? I'm just asking, okay? Here's another question. Have your children ever done anything evil or bad? You know, and if you push this button, they might remove them. Some of you are like, well, which one? I have 3, like, you know. Have your parents who you love, in their life, did they ever do anything evil or bad? And with that thought in mind, and if you would maybe pause for a moment before you push the button, then I think it begs this question. And here's the question I think it begs. If you might have a good reason not to do away with everything or everyone bad, is it possible that God has a reason to? I mean, is it possible that God might have a reason to? If you would hesitate thinking about people you love before, could you go, whoa, hold on a second. I never thought about if I'm getting rid of all evil and bad, that means I'm getting rid of, like people that I care about. And if you would pause, then maybe God actually has a reason to. You see, Christianity has always believed that you and I are the reason that God has not pushed the reset button on creation yet. This is what Christianity has always believed. That you and I, people, humanity, we are the reason that God has not pushed the reset button. And it's the same reason God has not gotten rid of all evil in the world is the same reason that I wouldn't get rid of all evil in the world, because I'd have to get rid of all of you. And everybody I've ever loved, and I'd be the only perfect human being still here. No, I'd have to get rid of myself too, right? I mean, do you see the point in this? Here's another way to consider this. Check out this, think about it this way. The only way for God to remove our chief complaint about God is to remove all the complainers. I mean, the only way for God to remove, God, why would you let that? How come? And all this evil and all this. The only way for God to do that is to remove all of us that are complaining. You see, Christianity has always taught that we are the reason that God is waiting. Peter, who was the first disciple invited by Jesus to follow him, who saw Jesus do miracles, who was there when Christ was crucified, saw him buried, witnessed a resurrected Christ, was there when Jesus said, all right, now you are going to be my church and carry out this mission. In fact, he told him, I'm going to build the church on you, and then he ascended into heaven. That guy, Peter, said these words. Here's what he said. He said, the Lord is not slow in doing what he promised. There is a promise that is in Scripture. There is a promise from God that gives us great hope for the future when it comes to this idea of evil and suffering. And I'm going to talk about that at the end. But he's saying the Lord is not slow in doing what he promised, hitting that reset button, the way some people understand slowness. But God is being patient with you. He does not want anyone to be lost, but he wants all people. What does he want for all people? He wants all people to change their hearts and lives. The same reason you pause before you hit that button is the same reason that God has paused. People, you and I. This is what Christians have always believed. Now, the reason this is hard for you and I to believe is because there's a level of hypocrisy in all of us, whether you're a Jesus person or not, whatever your worldview, religious persuasion is. There's a level of hypocrisy in all of us when we complain to God about evil and suffering. And let me explain what I mean. Because when you experience a problem, when you experience suffering, here's what I do. I pray for you. I mean, I do. I feel bad for you that you're going through that, but I pray for you. When you experience evil and suffering, it doesn't really rock my faith, right? I do. I feel bad for you, but I pray for you. Whatever your worldview is, maybe you don't believe in prayer, but you would send good vibes or thoughts. And I have no idea how you do that or what that means, but I see it on Facebook where people are like sending good vibes. And I don't know what that means, but anyway. Christians, we pray, which means we actually petition God on other people's behalf so that he might intervene. I don't know what good vibes do. But anyway, whatever your worldview is, when somebody else is going through pain and suffering, I have compassion. I feel bad for you, but it doesn't rock my faith. When pain and suffering comes to me, what do? I don't pray, right? I whine and I cry and I question God's goodness and I question his existence. Do you see the level of hypocrisy in that? And we all do this. The only time I doubt God over problems and suffering is when they really hit home for me. And that's this level of hypocrisy. You see, what we all really want, let me show you what we all want. What we all want is we all want to be in control of justice. We all want to have a can of justice that when we see things that are unjust, we can just spray them and be done, right? That's what we want. Like what we want is, we say, those people that abuse children, be gone. Let's get rid of all of them, right? Like people that are dishonest in business and intentionally steal and take advantage of other people, let's bring justice to every single one of them. All the people that work for the IRS and don't pay their taxes, boom, right? All the Democrats, all the Republicans, like whatever you're into, let's just, let's bring justice to all of them. And we like justice as long as we're holding the can. You know what? But we want more than this. We want more than a can of justice. Here's what else we want. We want bad spray, which is better than bug spray because we can just remove anything bad that we don't like, right? Telemarketers that call our house during dinner, be gone. Drug dealers infiltrating our children, drug cartels, let's get rid of all them. People involved in human trafficking, sex trafficking women and children, let's double spray them, okay? And here's the thing, justice smells good. Those of you in the front row, you smell it. And we like it. And we're all for it. We want to remove all the bad and we want to remove all the unjust as long as we're holding the cans. But guess what? You know who we don't want to hold these cans? Anybody but us. Why? Because they might spray us. Because here's my question. Have you ever done anything bad? Have you ever done anything unjust? So let's just partner with our Catholic brothers and sisters this morning and do a little confession for the soul. By a show of hands, raise your hand if you've ever done anything, just even one thing unjust. Hold it up. Some of you didn't raise your hand. You're a liar and you need bad spray. Be gone. Because we all have, right? And you know who we really don't want to get their hands on these cans? God. We don't want God to get his hands, because again, at the depths of our being, at the core of who we are, we all know that we have done things that are unjust, and we've all done things that are bad. And it is this very idea that leads us to two common beliefs in all of humanity. That there are these almost universal understandings across cultures, across history, across religious views. And the first one is this. Go ahead and write it down. The first one, we need to go to I think you're ahead. There we go. The first one is that certain things ought not be. Certain things ought not be. I mean, the reason that you want a can of justice, the reason that you want bad spray is because there's something in me and there's something in you that when you see things that are wrong, I mean, like you want to dispense justice. You want to get rid of them. I mean, there is almost a universal agreement in humanity that things like murdering innocent people, abusing children, raping someone, stealing from someone something that you don't own simply because you want it, universally, people would go, man, that is wrong. And so the question is, where do those ideas of right and wrong, justice and injustice, good and bad, where do those ideas come from? And it is this sense of ought and ought not that caused C.S. Lewis, a 20th century scholar and philosopher, to ultimately step away from atheism and become a Christian. It was actually this idea of evil in the world and the fact that he had this awareness of justice and just and unjust that caused him not to deny God, but actually come to faith in God. Everybody look at the bottom of your outline, turn your outline over, look at the back. Every week we recommend a bunch of resources that go along with what we're talking about, and there's 3 books that we're recommending every week: The Problem of God, The Reason for God, and Mere Christianity. In Mere Christianity, written by C.S. Lewis, he talks about his journey of faith from atheism to faith. And honestly, this idea we're talking about today was central for him to actually get to a place of theism, moving from atheism, there is no God, to theism, there must be a God. Because where do I get this idea of right and wrong from? And he writes this in his book. Let me just show you some of it. He says this: when I was an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I gotten this idea of just and unjust? In other words, where did this idea of right and wrong come from? Because think about this. You don't have to teach this idea of just and unjust to children. It is just in them. If you invited 8 3-year-olds over for a birthday party, first of all, that sounds terrible. But secondly, if you did, and you said, who wants ice cream? And they all were like, we want ice cream. And you went around and to 7 of them, you gave 1 scoop. And then you let all of them see that to one random kid, not because it's their birthday, just because you gave 2 scoops. What would happen? I mean, you would have mutiny at that birthday party. And eventually one of them or all of them would say, excuse me, you know, you're passing out the ice cream. Why did you give them 2 scoops and us 1? Because that's not fair. And where does this idea of fairness come from? This is what C.S. Lewis was saying. This is what he wrestled with. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? What was I comparing the universe with when I called it unjust? Of course, I could have just given up my idea of justice by saying that it was nothing but a private idea of my own. In other words, he could have said, yeah, okay, I just made that up, so now let's move on. And Darwinian thinking, atheist thinking, if you just say, hey, this is all just evolution, part of it, their explanation for where this comes from is simply that this is something that has happened throughout evolution for mankind to preserve himself. And so that the reason you have any ideas of right and wrong or just and unjust is because it actually just benefits you. And somewhere along the way in our evolutionary process, we all just decided that this is the best way for us to have the best life for us. That's end of story. That's where it comes from. But C.S. Lewis said, but if I did that, then my argument against God collapsed too. For the argument depended on saying that the world was really unjust, not simply that it did not happen to please my fancies. C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. You see, for C.S. Lewis, the fact that he wanted a justice can was reason to bring him toward belief in God. That sense of ought and ought not. And you have that whether you are a Jesus follower or not. That there are some things that should be and there are some things that should not. But it goes a step farther than that. Another common belief in almost all humanity is this: that the world is broken. That the world is broken. It's more than just something broken in here. Like, why is it that we know what is right, yet so many of us do what is wrong? Right? Like, universally, we get a brokenness that is in us. But we all also universally go, man, there are things outside of us. I mean, have you ever looked at a natural disaster that has caused devastation for innocent people and thought, man, surely this is not how the world is meant to be? Tornadoes, tsunamis, floods, droughts, famine. And you look at children and innocent people that are suffering just because they simply, are born into that place. When you hear things like cancer, brain tumor, disability, isn't there something in you that says, man, this is not how it should be? And that's why we want a can of justice spray to right those unjust wrongs. Because innocent people don't deserve those floods. That child didn't do anything to be born with that disease. The world is broken. And I want you to know that from the very beginning, this is what Christians have believed. In fact, here's what Christians have believed. Write this down. For thousands of years since the time of Jesus, Christians have always believed that the current world is not the original or final version. This is what Christians have always believed. That the way things are in you and the way things are in our world, they are not how they are originally intended to be. The Genesis narrative, the beginning of the story, says that God created everything and everything was in perfect harmony and perfect unity. Perfect relationship between God and man, perfect relationship between man and earth. That everything was just the way God wanted it to be. And then he handed over all the authority of earth to human beings, along with our most coveted attribute, free will. And then because of that free will and our choices, it brought with it the knowledge of good and evil because of mankind's choices and pain and suffering into God's perfect creation. And so because of our choices, everything under our authority suffered the consequences of sin with it, including our broken planet. This is what Christians have always believed. And so our current world is not the way that God intended it to be. Yet God didn't stay out of our mess, and he didn't stay out of the mess of this world. In fact, he sent himself back into the world through Jesus to restore the greatest brokenness that we caused, and that is separation between us and God. And the story of the Bible makes it abundantly clear. Jesus talked about it all the time, that the world as it is now is also not in its final version. The Apostle Paul wrote about it. Revelation points to it. That there is a day coming where Christ will return again and he will restore all things to how they originally were created to be. And this idea is what has helped both Christians make sense of suffering now and have hope that one day all suffering and all evil will come to an end. And this is
But I love that the final thought that James Grogan shared is that the current world is not the original nor the final version. God is not done. Well, hey, if you're anything like me, you got a lot of things going through your mind right now. So as you get ready to get into your discussion groups, I just want to encourage you, share, please, but give your friends also a chance to share their thoughts as well. This is a big deal. Listen, learn. Hopefully you'll find that the next time someone asks you this question, why does God allow evil and suffering in the world, you're in a little bit better position to give them an answer of hope and healing. Hey, let's jump in.